it is your buddy, peace and harmony with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful empowered harmonizers. We are zooming in and focusing in on a great viewer question, and that is to talk a little bit more about what it means to be walking on eggshells in a relationship. They just don't get that sort of, I guess, expression, and I thought that was a great viewer question. When we're talking about someone who you feel that you are walking on eggshells around, you sort of always feel that you are walking on a fence, you're walking on a tightrope, you're trying to avoid a narcissistic rage or a psychopathic rage where you've gotten sort of testy with somebody. You've tried to call out or be combative or sort of confrontational with a narcissist. Now, usually in relationships, you can bring things up and say, hey, we got to get here on time. We got to, get here earlier, or other things that you might have to discuss with somebody. But when we talk about sort of these general discussions, or, are oftentimes, if you're asking them to modify their behavior or keep their voice down or be on time or etc., call me when you say you're going to call, or any little thing, so I know because I was waiting, just any little sort of thing, they will be hypersensitive to, as if it's a ego threat or an ego attack to a narcissist when we talk about sort of walking on eggshells. So meaning that if you've been in a relationship with someone who is narcissistic, who is sort of, erupted out of narcissistic rage, which means it just seems sort of above and beyond what is the normal course of the relationship. So it just, a very elevated sort of very sort of superficial anger, just as if very immature or childlike, just sort of rejection, and oftentimes acting with very immature defense mechanisms. Well, then I'm not going to talk to you anymore, or I'm going to do this and that, or you've really push me now, or just sort of very erratic behavior that you can see from someone who's narcissistic, that can oftentimes come out of the blue, out of nowhere, and you're wondering, hey, I didn't know that you were so sensitive to this, or this would just, they feel a sense of ego attack. And so people after that, when you have gone sort of tested, or struck on a real sensitive nerve with a narcissist, which they can be very sensitive, despite the fact that they seem so strong, acting as if they're superior, better than, they have the best, etc. We know what we're talking about. These people who have a pathological sense of self-importance, they don't like to be challenged, called out, or have sort of open for normal discussion. It's just the limitation of a relationship. So if you've encountered just sort of this narcissistic rage, which feels very shallow, or oftentimes just, filled with a lot of unnecessary or illegitimate anger, it just seems sort of unfounded or not warranted of that type of response. Just, in other words, just, for the situation, for the setting, the response just seems way up the roof. Why are, completely overreacting, they got a flat tire and they're, beating up their car, just little things where the reaction is not fitting to the situation, and so the narcissist can oftentimes then create an atmosphere, if you will, or a baggage for other people where they sort of have had that laid into them, and then they feel that they have to be very careful or quiet, sort of walking on eggshells. In other words, meaning, I don't want to break anything, feeling sort of like a bull in a china shop, just sort of feeling that, you don't want to, break their delicate sort of ego barrier, or, it's just a feeling of uneasiness, and you should not put yourself through that, obviously. Why would you always compromise, your own happiness for the sake of a relationship on a real, severe basis? So, one thing I find with people who have been in these trying and very traumatizing relationships with people who are narcissistic or psychopathic is they always tend to sort of blame themselves and sort of put up with this walking on eggshells, feeling that it's me who has to change, it's me who's the problem, and they feel that they must be the one to adapt and adjust to them. There's this tendency or emotional habit of feeling that you have to conform to others' standards rather than being defined by your own, as if there's, it has to be more sort of forward approaching according to others, and sort of that compliance, not that you're defiant, but the narcissist can sort of require or demand this, everywhere from your dress, how you talk, what you eat, where you go. They can require a lot of compliance, and so they are, looking for people who are to be complicit or as is following, and not questioning of them, just sort of going along and just sort of keeping, under their radar, sort of as supply. And so that walking on eggshells oftentimes I feel experienced in a prolonged basis, where the suffering once again is by the supply. The others, they will willingly suffer to keep the relationship going. There becomes this sort of sacrificial need in those people who are quote unquote the supply, or the people who prop them up, or their supporters, their givers, the one who are always giving them the time, the affection, the back rub, the foot rub, leading, taking care of them, talking about their day. It never flips around. It doesn't ever become well-rounded, in factoring, all, it just becomes very lopsided and imbalanced. And so I find that a lot of people will stay with a narcissist and suffer, because they just don't know how to make a change. They don't know how to approach a narcissist with sensitive issues, because they are hypersensitive. They have sensitivities about their appearance, their ego, their public self. They have to be perfect, and or unquestioned. They just don't like to be very open. They kind of feel that that it should go down. It should only go one direction. So if you found yourself one of those individuals who has been in sort of walking on eggshells, that you've suffered for the sake of the relationship, to what degree do you still need and want to bring that suffering onto yourself and live in that lack of trust and that lack of serenity? To what degree is that required in a functional relationship? Sure, there's always going to be a need for compromise. There's always going to be uncertainties, but on a sort of always walking on eggshells, as if you're always on an emotional tightrope. Are you going too fast, too slow? It's always up for attack. And so, don't feel that you should be in that position of being subject to the attack, or, it's almost like the double standard, where they can, when necessary, sort of, turn it around and then attack or challenge, and question and doubt you, and lead into that gaslighting. It becomes sort of a vicious cycle. Great question. This is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, here today. I hope the videos do help. Please share, subscribe, and please donate for more great tools, videos, discussions, and support. Have a beautiful day.